Well, good evening, everybody. Sorry to distract you from the excitement of waiting to see who wins the presidential election. Um, it's not something that I'm overly concerned about, for the simple reason that, and I don't know if we get onto this in the review. I can't remember. But the interesting thing is that when it comes to the book Blind Injustice, Mark Godsey actually explains that sometimes Republican judges and attorneys, and people who are more of the conservative line can actually be quite good to deal with, whereas the Democrats might not be. Whereas, of course, for a lot of people, it would seem that the Democrats would be the more sort of liberal, and he explains that really it's not always the case. And all I would say is thank goodness for that. I don't want to start talking about politics and the different policies of the different parties. When it comes to the legal system, I think that we should completely remove politics from it. But having said that, I'm fully aware of the fact that when you see some of the bad actors that are engaged in the legal system, you can see exactly why they end up. Some of these these bad attorneys end up as either judges or in the legal system. People like Jim Harding, Ken Kratz, and Brad Schimmel come to mind. Anyway, just going to crack on then with the next part of the review of this particular book. And let's just make sure everything's working fine. Yeah, everything seems to be working fine. So let's call up the page in question. Actually, just before we do that, not going to make this too long. I've been in touch with a few people, hopefully with a view to getting them to come on and join in for a chat. Still hopeful that Bose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can line something up with them sometime in December. Hopefully, both Mark Godsey, the author of the book, Charlie Berens, will line something up. And also, I've received some positive feedback, shall we say, from the filmmaker Sean Reck of the Convicting a Murderer. So hopefully, we're going to line up a chance to chat with him. But it doesn't matter whether they're somebody that's been in the game a long time or whether they're somebody like Greg yesterday, Big Dog. It's great to speak with all of these people. I'm certainly hoping that we can get some of these chats lined up. Anyway, let's crack on then, as I say, with the next part of the review of the book. So as I say, we left off at chapter 3 of the review, blind bias. Now, by bias, Mark Godsey does not mean bias in general, in the same way that the author is biased against the New York Yankees. Okay, he means confirmation bias that tends to blind us to other explanations for phenomena that we observe. The subtle but corrosive effect of confirmation bias is one of the most disturbing aspects of not just your legal system, but any legal system that the innocence movement has unmasked. Indeed, this bias affects us all in our day-to-day lives. If we favour candidate X or Team A, and the issue is at all close, it seems to us that X won the debate and the A players did not commit a foul. Those who favour candidate Y and Team B will likely reach precisely the opposite conclusion, and we will often be surprised to learn that our view is not shared by all. Most of the time, confirmation bias does no real harm. Elections are determined by counting votes, or so we hope. The officials on the field make the final call whether it was a foul. But when confirmation bias makes an innocent suspect look guilty, it does incalculable harm. Moreover, the vaunted trial procedure guarantees that we once thought separated the innocent from the guilty, that the court has lionized over and over, are less successful than we have been taught. I have long told my students that the presumption of innocence, the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and the requirement, in almost all states, of a unanimous jury verdict does far less than we assume to protect the innocent, because once a case gets to trial, most cases against innocent defendants just look like cases against guilty defendants. This weird effect is largely the result of confirmation bias. Once police officers or detectives have a theory of the case and a suspect, they tend to see every piece of evidence as confirming their theory. It is the way the human brain is wired. Pieces of evidence that go against the original theory are often simply rejected. That evidence is unreliable or the witness mistaken. Prosecutors who get a case file with a theory and a suspect suffer the same confirmation bias. Godsey reports his own experience with confirmation bias in a striking passage. So, quoting from the book from Mark Godsey himself. In fact, when I was hired as a prosecutor, one of the first things I was told was not to write down the parts of a witness's statement that I believed were incorrect until he had, quote, come to Jesus and told the, quote, truth. If we wrote down an early version of the witness's recollection, when he still might be confused, it would later have to be turned over to the defense attorney, and that witness would be torn apart on cross-examination for changing his story. The defense attorney might even suggest to the jury that we had told the witness what to say and coaxed him into changing his story. Now, that, of course, is arguably what we had done in reality, but we didn't see it that way. If the police and prosecutors have ignored or mischaracterized evidence of innocence while doubling down on circumstantial and other thin evidence of guilt, the innocent defendant who appears in court looks guilty to the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, and probably even to the defense lawyer. Is it any wonder we have uncovered over 2,000 cases of innocent prisoners, and who knows how many more remain undiscovered? The blind bias problem also shows up when forensic evidence is offered. For decades, the FBI fingerprint experts assured us that there was zero chance of error when they make a fingerprint match. We now know, and this is a great example, that not only is this untrue, but also that there are a host of problems with fingerprint matches. Many have written about the Brandon Mayfield case, in which the FBI confidently found a match between the prints of an Oregon lawyer and latent prints found at the site of the Madrid terrorism attack. And yet the Spanish authorities disagreed. The FBI condescendingly repeated its conclusion and tried to browbeat the Spanish experts into agreeing. They never did. Later, of course, the latent prints were conclusively matched to those of an Algerian national. Confirmation bias played a role here too. Now, Mayfield had no passport, and thus there is no record of a trip to Spain. Because that did not fit the FBI story of the case, they asserted, you're going to love this bit, they asserted that he must have travelled under an assumed name. To substantiate the case, the FBI claimed to have confiscated miscellaneous Spanish documents from Mayfield's office and home. These documents turned out to be his young children's Spanish homework. Oh, God. How does it get any better than that? Gee whiz. Okay, so let's get serious for a minute. So I'll stop there. So, what are the problems with fingerprint identification? They can be grouped into 3 categories. First, there is no standard in this country for how many points of similarity must be found before a match can be established. Many other countries have standards, most of which are greater than what the FBI will accept as a match in a given case. I never knew that. Second, many latent prints are incomplete and faint. As Mark Godsey puts it, murderers rarely dip their fingers evenly in blood and carefully roll each finger across the knife they just used to murder someone. And there is subjectivity in what counts as a match. In the Mayfield case, for example, the FBI claimed there were 15 similarities between his prints and the ones found at the scene of the terrorist attack, whilst the Spanish authorities saw only 7. Third, and most troubling, fingerprint experts in this country, and perhaps everywhere, do not follow the scientific method. They are given the fingerprint from the scene of the crime and a clean fingerprint of the suspect. In effect, they are told, please confirm that we have the right suspect. And when a second or third expert confirms the initial match, they are told the opinion of the earlier experts. Sometimes the police are none too subtle in communicating that they want a match. Godsey includes a photocopy of a request for examination of physical evidence, revealing that the victim was shot in his vehicle, which the suspect reportedly drove prior to the shooting. The report also notes that prints were found in the vehicle that did not match the victim or his wife. In remarks, the police tell the expert that the print he has is from the person who pulled the trigger, making every effort to place him in the truck, and noting that one witness riding in the truck was too drunk to make an identification. But the reliability problems with fingerprints pale by comparison to, quote, expert testimony about hair matches, crowbar markings, tire tracks, bite marks, blood spatter, and a host of other forensic disciplines. In 2015, we learned that between 2,000 and 3,000 convictions included FBI hair match evidence that was deeply flawed. And of course, Steve was partly described as being, was partly, it was presented at his 1985 trial that I think Sherry Colhane said, that yes, the hairs that were found could be a match to Stephen Avery, or at least it was presented in a way that we couldn't exclude it was Stephen Avery who had attacked Penny Bernstein. The Justice Department and the FBI formally acknowledged that nearly every examiner in an elite FBI forensic unit gave flawed testimony in almost all trials in which they offered hair match evidence against criminal defendants over more than a 2-decade period before the year 2000. In the first 268 of these hair match cases to be reviewed, 26 of 28 examiners in the FBI microscopic hair comparison unit overstated forensic matches in ways that favored prosecutors in more than 95% of the cases. 32 of those defendants were sentenced to death and 14 have been executed or died in prison. Of course, in many cases, there was other evidence of guilt, and the flawed hair match testimony did not cause a wrongful conviction. Still, it is disconcerting, to say the least, that the FBI admits the use of flawed forensic evidence in thousands of cases. And 4 defendants in the pool of the first 268 had been exonerated before the problem with hair match evidence was discovered. That tentatively suggests that the error rate in the cases where these examiners testified must be at least 1.5% and is almost certainly much higher. In 2009, the National Academy of Sciences, NAS, first chartered by Congress during the Lincoln administration, released a report entitled Strengthening Forensic Science in the United States, A Path Forward. The news release was titled Badly Fragmented Forensic Science System Needs Overhaul. Evidence to support reliability of many techniques is lacking. The first paragraph pulled no punches. A congressionally mandated report from the National Research Council finds serious deficiencies in the nation's forensic science system and calls for major reforms and new research. Rigorous and mandatory certification programs for forensic scientists are currently lacking, the report says, as are strong standards and protocols for analyzing and reporting on evidence. And there is a dearth of peer-reviewed, published studies establishing the scientific basis and reliability of many forensic methods. Moreover, many forensic science labs are underfunded, understaffed, and have no effective oversight. A news release from the National Academy of Sciences concluded that much forensic evidence lacks proof of reliability, should have been front page news in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, and many other newspapers. How many newspapers covered the release of the report? 1. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and only 5 news sources have even referred to the report in the 8 years since it was released. The New York Law Journal, Knoxville News Sentinel, Philadelphia Inquirer, the Columbian, and the Fulton County Daily Report. The report concluded in typical understated science language that forensic science, quote, has serious problems that can only be addressed by a national commitment to overhaul the current structure that supports the forensic evidence community in this country. The forensic science community of experts, perhaps unsurprisingly, has largely resisted to the utmost any attempt to require scientific rigor in their analysis. David Harris provides many examples. Mark Godsey has perhaps the most staggering example I have come across. After the NAS report showed how deeply flawed is the science of bite mark identification, the American Board of Forensic Odontology waged aggressive, sometimes highly personal campaigns to undermine the credibility of people who have raised concerns. The American Board of Forensic Odontology conducted its own study to demonstrate the reliability of bite mark evidence. But its own study demonstrated wildly divergent views on the 100 cases from the panel of 39 experts. That in itself is not all that surprising, but what happens next borders on the unbelievable. The American Board of Forensic Odontology tried to cancel the panel that was due to report the results of the study. When they were unable to cancel the panel, presenters from the American Board of Forensic Odontology downplayed the significance of the study, criticizing the organization's own methodology criticized the method of odontology study as flawed. And I'm not going to say it again. The American Board of Forensic Odontology encouraged its members to continue testifying about this science in courtrooms. The ABFO decided not to publish or release its study. Godsey concludes, prosecutors who continue to support bite mark evidence have sometimes reacted with similar defensiveness, if not outright dishonesty. Even more disappointing, the legal community seems blissfully unaware of the NAS report. Godsey reports that when he speaks about the report to audiences that include prosecutors and judges, very few know anything about strengthening forensic science. And I suppose I must point out, the Dean and Jerry opening the Center for the Integrity of Forensic Science. It's just won an award in Wisconsin for what it's trying to do. Anyway, let's carry on. Where do we get to? Many have not even heard of it. And of course, little reform resulted in the 8 years since the report's release. We are, in sum, faced with the following terrible realization. The criminal legal community, including prosecutors, judges, defense lawyers, and forensic experts, has been on notice for 8 years that the methods used in non-DNA expert testimony are flawed and sometimes deeply flawed, and nothing has been done about it. The one concrete, albeit tentative, effect from the report was the Department of Justice creation of a National Commission on Forensic Science with the charge to implement some of the report's suggestions. Shortly after it began its work, however, Donald Trump was elected president and his administration promptly killed it. The beat goes on. Oddly enough, even defense lawyers do not seem eager to jump on the bandwagon. In 1993, the Supreme Court created a mini revolution in judicial gatekeeping, where expert witness testimony is challenged. In a civil case, Daubert versus Merrill Dow Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, the court set some fairly rigid scientific standards that expert testimony must meet before it is admissible. To be sure, Daubert affects only federal cases, but most states have followed suit. One study looked at challenges in federal and state criminal cases before and after Daubert. The study's authors and the legal community generally expected to find increased attention to admissibility and a lower rate of admissible expert testimony after Daubert. Readers at this point will not be surprised at the study's conclusions. Comparing appellate decisions in the 5.5 years prior to and after Daubert, the study found no change in the overall rate of admission for all types of expert evidence in criminal cases. So when it comes to challenging the credibility of experts, a little bit like Shami Shabani, you've got people that don't even question their credibility. I can't help thinking Nick Stalker. He was the blood spatter expert, and yet apparently his field of expertise is actually handwriting analysis, and yet nobody challenged his, well, at least he was allowed to give testimony. I don't know if he was challenged at all. I seem to remember reading the part in the trial where Dean Strang has a chance to speak with to examine Nick Stalker, and I don't think there was any challenge to him presenting evidence. But I'm pretty sure this is what this is referring to. Anyway, carrying on. But this study was before the strengthening forensic science report was issued. If defense lawyers were aware of the report, its claims that most forensic evidence offered in criminal cases lacks scientific precision should have prompted these lawyers to attack expert testimony more vigorously, and it should have given them ammunition to discredit more of this expert testimony. Thus, in the years after the report, we should have seen more Daubert challenges in criminal cases, and we should have seen more of them succeed. Preliminary data suggests that neither effect has been observed. The number of cases raising Daubert claims in the 5-year period before and after strengthening forensic science is almost exactly the same. 660 cases before, 654 after. Moreover, the success rate in Daubert claims in criminal cases actually falls in the post-report period from 50% in the earlier period to 36% in the later period. Of course, it is possible that prosecutors and forensic scientists read the report and markedly improved their methods and presentation of evidence. But anecdotal evidence to the contrary abounds. My Daubert study also disclosed that in the almost 10 years since the publication of the Strengthening Forensic Science Report, only 152 cases in the Westlaw and Lexis database have cited the report. It has been cited 3 times by the United States Supreme Court in a majority opinion holding that forensic experts should be exposed to cross-examination as a way to expose any problems with their science, in a dissent in the same case arguing that it is improper for the court to take notice of a report directed at legislators, and as a see generally cite in a per curiam opinion involving firearms and tool mark identification. Available evidence suggests that the system has failed to give effect to the strengthening forensic science report. If this is correct, it is blind bias, criminal justice failure of the first order. So, okay, we've got as far as chapter 4 of this review. Let's come on back to here. Let me remove that. Let me just quickly say hi to the usual suspects, the usual teams here. Hi, JD. Hi, Sean Maroney. Hi, Dark Side of the Moon. Nice to see you all. And to anybody else that watches this at a later date. I fully understand that there is obviously much interest in what's going on over there in America. As I say, I don't want to turn this into any kind of political discussion, but it would appear to me from the tweets, certainly that I've seen from likes of Jerry Buting and Steve Drizzen, and from what I understand, that Wisconsin has voted more for the Democrats than the Republicans. So at least those people will be happy. Me, I'm still reminded of the election back in 2016 when on the Tuesday of the elections, I remember pupils of mine saying these were well-educated doctors saying, that for heaven's sake, please don't let Donald Trump win. The very next day, or the day after, my first pupil, a retired policeman, came in and I said, "Oh, how's it going, Jeff?" And he said, "Oh, absolutely great." Because he said, first of all, the UK has left Europe, Brexit has happened, and finally America has voted in a proper president. And I thought, well, there you go. It's people have completely different opinions, don't they? Because I suppose what this confirmation bias is often alluding to. Anyway, as I say, all I can say is that hopefully I will get good news over the next few days as to who's going to come forward and join me for a chat. Hoping for a mixture of guests all the way up to and including sort of Christmas period. If they all come off, all well and good. If not, then we will certainly keep going with these. Discussing the Mark Godsey book, and that there's a lot of other things that I want to go through. Anyway, we'll catch you all again soon, and hopefully, no matter which side of the political fence you're on, that whatever happens, hopefully it'll be for the good, and we can see some make some headway. As I say, it's I was expecting to see some mention of it in the review. I can't remember if it does, but as I say, Mark Godsey is quite interesting when he talks about political persuasion. Anyway, I shall shut up there. Let you get back to following the election. Hi T1. It's there is an election. It's probably not that important. Okay, we'll catch you all again soon. Bye for now.